All right, good evening, everyone. We're going to get things started here. Today is Tuesday, October 24. We are here for a joint meeting between the Town Council, the School Committee, and the School Building Committee to discuss the new high school proposal. But first order of business, as always, is Pledge of Allegiance to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, next on the agenda is the land acknowledgement statement, which I will read. The town of South Kingstown pays homage to the indigenous people and land in which the town is now located. Let this acknowledgement serve as a reminder of our ongoing efforts to recognize, honor, reconcile, and partner with the Narragansett tribe whose land and water we benefit from today. Next, we're going to do the roll call. Susan?
Council President McEntee.
Here.
Council Vice President Marin.
Here.
Councilwoman Bergner.
Here.
Councilwoman Alley.
Here.
Councilwoman Rose is absent this evening.
Thank you, Susan. I'm going to ask Chairperson Paula Whitford to take the roll for the school committee.
Mr. Bradley, Ms. Calvetta.
Here.
Mr. Bradley Chair.
Here.
Ms. James Receiver.
Here.
Ms. Melissa Boyd. Here. Ms. Michelle Russo.
Here.
Myself here, and Ms. Massinensi will be with us shortly.
Thank you. Next, I'm going to ask Vice Chair Brian Mahoney, the School Building Committee, to take the roll for the School Building Committee members present tonight.
Robert Littlefield. Here. Dr. McGarre is not currently here. Mr. Lynch is not currently here. Brian. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Brian Mahoney's here. Kate will be here soon. Dave here. Luke Murray. Brian Sylvia.
Here.
And James Manny.
Here.
Excellent, thank you. All right, we're going to dive right into it. Next on the agenda is a presentation regarding school development plans and updated cost estimates. I'm going to invite up a representative from Left Field, project manager, to discuss this.
Good evening, members of Town Council, School Committee, School Building Committee. My name is Chris Spiegel. I'm a senior project manager with Left Field Project Management. I'm here today to discuss the revised cost estimates based on our meeting last week. If this group remembers last week, the committee asked Left Field and Studio Jade to go back to our drawings, go back to the design, and see how efficient we could make the building in the hopes of taking a look at the cost and seeing what the cost estimates would flesh out. We have done so with myself, along with Phil Conti, my partner, Matt McBurney. We went back and took a look at the school building program, which was developed during the Stage 2. This is a list of all of your academic program spaces, as well as all of your support spaces that are required for your school. We took a look at that program, and we designed the most efficient building possible that we could see fit using all of those required programming spaces. The programming spaces, once we vetted out, you'll see that we have laid out a typical floor plan right here of the new South Kingstown High School. We were able to get the building down to 143,900 square feet. This includes a 725-person auditorium, a full gym with the capacity to fit 725 spectators. This includes an $11 million field complex at Curtis Corner. This cost also includes the construction of the school on the current high school site while building remains in operation, eliminating the need for any swing space. The plan also, as you can see, contains multiple CTE classrooms. I'll let Phil Conti go into a little bit more detail about that in a second. But the numbers have proven out at this point. We're looking at hard costs for the project of $117,454,875 and soft costs for the project at $15,933,207. That brings the subtotal for that amount of work to $133,388,000. We have factored an escalation to midpoint of construction at $10,368,963.13, bringing our new subtotal to $143,757,045. And then we have included $10 million in owner's contingencies. Owner's contingencies handle things like scope creep, unsuitable soils that we may found on site, ledge, other things of that nature, unknowns at this point in the project. Our contingencies for this project are $10,062,993,000, which represents about 7.5% of the total project value. The total of hard costs, soft costs, escalation, and contingencies brings us to a total of $153,820,038.28. I'd be happy to take any questions on how we came up with the budget. At this point, though, I believe Phil can go into the revised floor plan and give a presentation on that.
Any questions on these figures from the council?
There's a breakdown of the budget numbers attached on the following pages as well.
Not on the figures themselves, but for the benefit of the public, can you give a couple of definitions here, how you define soft costs first, and then escalation and contingencies?
Of course. So soft costs are things like architectural fees, environmental engineers, things like that that aren't part of your trade costs, your direct trade costs that accounts to building a building. So your hard costs are things like your concrete, your direct trade work, your roofing, your HVAC appurtenances, those types of elements. Your soft costs are basically the design and the owner's fees that are required to get a building of such a size to the design phase, through the design phase, into construction, and finally through closeout. Escalation we're carrying because this is a volatile construction market, as we've all seen over the last 4 or 5 years. We want to make sure that this project is protected so that we do not end up in a situation like some other communities where they've already gotten all of their money on board, then they go out to build the project and find out that they're short. By including this escalation number where we have escalated the project to the midpoint of construction. It should be noted, though, that, however, all trades will be bought out prior to the midpoint of construction. So again, this is like an insurance policy that we make sure that this project has. We don't end up in a situation where you're in the ground, you've already have your foundations poured, and you can't afford to make the building go vertical.
Can you just explain just that part? All trades will be bought out? What does that mean?
So sure. So a project like this usually requires a construction manager at risk. The construction manager will go out, they'll be hired by the town, and the construction manager will go out and solicit bids for each individual division of work, like concrete or sheet metal or light gauge metal framing, steel. These are all different divisions of work. Each one of those specific bids then gets taken back to a committee, and those bids are reviewed and then awarded based on that committee's approval. This is a big difference between construction management at risk and a design bid build general contractor project. With a general contractor project, the town or the committee has no choice over what subcontractors they employ. You're going on lowest bid. With the construction manager at risk project, we have a say in which subcontractors are brought on board to do the work here in South King.
So do you think, can I have a follow-up? So do you think that's a helpful thing to have, the construction? Is that?
So yes, absolutely. So being able to, having a construction manager at risk is beneficial to this project for a number of reasons. The first is for the bonus points. In order to qualify for all of the bonus points that RIDE is offering for this project, we have to have this project under contract by June 30th of this year, or next year, I should say. If we do not have the project under contract, then we could lose out on all those bonus points. In order to go a hard bid or a general contractor type project, we would need to bring designs up to 90% construction documents. We are about a year and a half away from having 90% construction documents, or a year away from 90% construction documents. So really a hard bid or a general contractor type bid is off the table for South Kingstown. A construction manager at risk also, like the name applies, at risk. Once we sign a contract with the construction manager for the guaranteed maximum price, it's called a GMP, a guaranteed maximum price of that contract, it is on the contractor to build that building for that price. Any cost overruns that are not caused by the owner in terms of additional scope now falls on the construction manager. They are at risk for those costs.
One thing that I really don't understand is how we got so far in the process where we were, we had the enabling legislation and all of these things in place before we got a due diligence assessment. It seems to me that that would be, something very important to prevent the situation that we're in now. when I first looked at the papers that you gave us in the meeting several weeks ago, I noticed there was a number of items on the estimate that was not included in the original estimate, and a lot of increases, like, for instance, increase from $1 million to $5 million on the demolition. I guess the thing is just how do we make sure that we have the right number this time and that we're not just, spinning our wheels again like we have been?
So it's a great question. So when Left Field was brought on in August, the first thing that we were asked to do is a due diligence estimate of the previous estimates that have been provided by your project team. That is the role of the owner's project manager, is to go in to look at your estimates and make sure you are carrying every single cost that we see as being fully realized in a budget. So that was Left Field's job. We took your estimates and we filled in those holes like you talked about. We think we have accounted for every single cost that could potentially befall this project, and we've done so not only through making sure that these numbers are proven out in the individual line items of your budget, but by also carrying contingencies and escalation costs and things like that. It is the role of the owner's project manager to make sure that all those numbers are in there, and we have done that based on our contract with you. That was our first task, and that was the first task that we presented to the school building committee.
I want to ask you a little bit further about this escalation figure here. Now, you mentioned that the costs are escalated to the midpoint of construction. How far out does that go? What is it? It looks like you got a 9.5% rate here. That's like an increase of cost that's factored into what the cost is now projected into the future. Is that what this is?
You've explained that correctly, yes. We take a look at what the cost is right now. We look at trends in the industry. We talk to construction managers that we're doing work with on other projects, the best ones in Rhode Island, and we say, what is the number right now? Where do you see this industry trending? What are the market trends? And we account for that in our escalation figure.
Now, the midpoint of construction, what date is that? How far out does this escalation rate extend?
Matt, I'd like to bring up Matt McBurney. Matt McBurney's a former construction manager himself. He's been handling the scheduling for this project. Matt?
So right now, midpoint of construction is early of 2026.
So considering the escalation figure, there's no or low risk that if we were to proceed down a route with a new number, perhaps 150, just speaking hypothetically here, get enabling legislation, and then have a vote in the spring, there'd be low risk that this number of a 153 that you're giving us now is likely to change. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that between the escalation and the contingencies that we have within the budget.
Now, how do we account for increase of costs beyond midpoint of construction?
So
Costs
it's,
are locked in at that point, there'd be no
you're,
risk of
you're,
escalated costs?
you're locked in because of that buyout at the early stage of the project. When you buy out at the beginning of the project, the escalation to midpoint accounts for your subcontractors putting their own escalation on that. So by midpoint of construction, you have your project bought out, you're at your GMP. The cost doesn't go up unless the owner, South Kingstown, decides to add to the project.
So at that point, assuming the project stays the same and no additions are added, there is no risk that the cost will increase beyond the midpoint.
No risk on South Kingstown, risk on the construction manager.
All right, thank you. Go ahead.
I was just going to follow up to, I want to clarify that. So you're basically saying the subtotal of 143,000 is what we could generally expect the high school to cost. Wait, don't interrupt, please. And then the contingencies are what Chris said were for unexpected ledge, right? So the high school could cost X, but the additional 7 million is for like you're plowing into something at Curtis Corner and it's not correct.
Correct. So you get to a subtotal before your contingencies,
Yep.
but the contingencies have to be treated as part of the project budget
Right.
for the off chance that you do need all of it.
But if everything came up roses,
Right. So that is also the other benefit of a GMP. If you come in under the GMP, that money gets returned to the town. So that the construction manager doesn't take that as a profit.
So
Okay.
just to continue on that, if this was to go to a general contractor will low bid this work, will award it on a low bid. It is their job to make money then by trying to figure out ways that they can come in under that number. A construction manager makes a fee for their work. Their cost for the work does not change if the project costs go up. So it's an additional layer of protection for the owner. And it's why we're recommending a CMAR project delivery method for this project moving forward.
What?
Sorry, construction manager at risk, CMAR.
I have a question about one line in the budget for commissioning for $250,000. Who is that for? What does that represent?
So RIDE requires, in order to be reimbursed, that a third-party commissioning agent come in. Commissioning is an outside vendor, a third party, who takes a look at all of your mechanical systems, your HVAC systems, your lighting systems, your plumbing systems, and make sure that they're working as they were designed. An example of commissioning perhaps maybe not going as well as it should be, you could take a look at Pawtucket with the Henry Winter School. All of their commissioning wasn't done in the way that it should be at that point. But that's a great project, so I don't want to take anything away from that project. But the point about the third-party commissioning is that you have a third party come in to validate everything, to make sure that when you get in the building, your heating systems are working as they're supposed to, your lighting systems are working as you're supposed to, your energy efficient systems are working as they're supposed to. And as I said, it's a RIDE requirement.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions from members?
That's good for now.
All right. School committee? Go ahead.
Mr. Spiegel, can I just ask you, please, to repeat something that you said earlier? You gave us some examples of the contingencies in that $10 million figure. Can you just run that by me again, please?
So sure. So examples of ways that we might use the contingency on this project were if we were to start digging down and we were to uncover ledge or bedrock that we would need to mitigate either by drilling or by blasting in order to make the project, sink the foundations for the project. Another example of how a contingency might be used is if you were to find unsuitable soil for some reason that's unsuitable to build upon, and you would have to bring in new soil for that project. The main point of these contingencies is that we don't want to get to a point in the project where we then have to take away from your scope to address some of these unforeseen conditions. We don't want to be down the road, we run into a $5 million issue with ledge, and then now we have to say to you, we have to take $5 million out of the project. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions from school committee members? All right. Thank you. Bill, come on up.
Good evening, everyone. Philip Conte, President of Studio Jade. I will be brief and just direct your attention to the plans and explain what we have reduced from the submission we made in the Stage 2 to get to the 143,000 square feet. In general, we reduced the plan after working with the administration and the principal in left field by about 5,000 square feet. We did that by eliminating some amenities, such as the walking track around the gymnasium. We recognized some efficiencies by locating all of the science and CTE programs related to science all up on the third floor. We reduced the classroom size to what we feel would be the minimum functional space. We reduced the auditorium to 725 seats. We felt that it would be important to at least have a student assembly in that space, as well as provide about 725 bleacher seating in the gymnasium for the entire student body. So if on the left-hand side at the top is the first floor plan. The red dots identify main entrances into the school, and it's not uncommon at a large high school to have major spaces such as music, drama, and the auditorium. That is in the blue color in the bottom right-hand corner, adjacent to the other large public space, which is the gymnasium and the athletic locker rooms, which is in the teal. Adjacent to that is typically high bay CTE spaces, such as your construction tech. That is located in the tan color in the upper right-hand corner. Moving to the left, we have a very simple circulation pattern that's identified in orange. You can go from front to back, from left to right in the school. You have the administration and the nurse in that orange block near the main entrance, followed by the student commons where the dining, and then the cafeteria and mechanical space in the back, trying to keep that central core located as efficiently as possible. And then to the left in the purple is the beginning of what we call the academic tower. And that is 3 floors of classrooms, the 3rd floor being this lower board on the floor, which is all of the science spaces, maintaining a very efficient core in the middle of collaboration spaces, mechanical spaces, restrooms, teacher workrooms, etc. So this is the reduced plan. It is still oriented as it was presented as a rectangular bar building. To the left of that academic tower is the Hazard Building. The main entrance faces School Street, and immediately behind that, parallel to School Street, would be the secondary road or bus drop-off. And then immediately beyond that is the current location of the high school, which would be athletic fields.
All right, thank you, Phil. Any questions for Phil up here? Go ahead.
So in previous school building committee meetings, we did hear from neighbors, and just wanted, if you could address any screening or trees or sort of buffering that might exist for the neighbors that currently buffer the high school?
Sure. So if you recall, we had a number of schemes of how the building would fit on this site. This scheme does represent the most compact version, where we have pulled it as close as we can to School Street and has moved it as far over as we can to Hazard, screening as much as we can for the neighbors onto the right side.
And so the parking for the faculty and students is located where?
So we have parking identified across the front between School Street and the main entrance,
Okay.
and we have parking identified to the right of the building,
Okay.
with the bus drop-off being along the back, and that's where the mechanical yards are as well.
Okay.
So we won't be putting trash out facing any neighbors.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Phil? School committee? Go ahead, Carol.
So I'm just curious, the CTE spaces that are on the first floor at the very top here, is that like a one-level bump out? Because on the second floor, they're not there. So is that open to the second floor, or how does that work?
Sure. So the colors are very close, unfortunately, and when it printed, it may be a little deceiving. The only CTE space on the first floor is to the far right, which is construction technology, on the other side of the gym. Those 2 bump outs that you see at the top, also in tan color, those represent mechanical yards. Those are the locations for dumpsters and major mechanical equipment. Then those are yards, basically. They're just walled in, screened from the neighbors, so you can hide mechanical equipment, dumpsters, food deliveries come in through that way, etc. The other CTE spaces are on the second floor. The green corner is the media center, which would look out onto the new fields. And adjacent to that are a number of the computer and art CTE programs. They're on the second floor in that tan color. That white void in the middle on the second floor is a 2-story space. It's open to the student commons below.
One wing, the classroom wing is third floor, everything else. So when you say the common space is open to 2 stories, it's not open to 3.
Correct, it's only open to 2. Only the academic tower goes 3 floors, and the 3rd floor of the academic tower is all science-related and CTE-related to sciences.
was already on. Good thing we weren't talking. The only thing I wanted to chime in and express, because he is not here, I don't see Chip here, Dr. McGarr has worked very closely with Phil, so even though they did shrink some of the classroom sizes, Dr. McGarr assured us, and it was the reason why they went with 143 instead of smushing it down to 140, so that we were able to provide the best programmatic offerings to our students without impacting that in a negative way. So they're quite happy. They won't be able to go much smaller, though. Otherwise, the academic programs would be impacted. So he's worked, Dr. Conti, Phil has worked very closely with Dr. McGarr and the teachers to make sure that the programmatic, because the purpose of the building, of course, is to educate our students. That's our most important piece, so that it's not getting, it won't be stifled because of the size reduction.
Go ahead, Deb.
So I did ask a question about the buffering for the neighbors, but we don't really talk about the removal of the current high school, and, how do we plan to mitigate if there's any potential hazards or anything related to the destruction of Columbia Street, I guess? Is it,
Yeah, okay.
like, that's where I think there could be some unexpected oh no's type of thing, because we don't know what's there and it's very old.
So we've the reason that number went from 1 million to 5 million, as the councilwoman pointed out, was because of our concerns about that exact thing. So we were concerned about what might be in the building as it was built so many years ago. So that's why we raised that number up. In terms of logistics and how we're going to be moving around the site and how we're going to impact school operations to a minimal effect, as well as the neighbors, that's part of our construction manager at risk procurement process.
Okay.
When we issue a request for qualifications for those contractors, we will be requesting that they submit detailed logistics plans, that they submit detailed site safety plans, and these will all be reviewed by the school building committee or whoever is on a selection committee for that group, and that's a major component that goes into who we select as a construction manager. It's very important, especially with the construction manager, that you are getting what you are paying for. Construction manager at risk is like that, so we want to make sure that it's their qualifications that really shine when we're looking at a construction manager like that.
Thank you.
All right, any last thoughts on this before we move on? All right, we're going to move on here. Item 4, review of school building project projections and related financial data. We're going to go to you, Brian Sylvia. Or Jim, you can start off.
Thank you, Council President. I'm prepared tonight to just give you a very brief executive summary of Director Brian Sylvia to my left, the Finance Director, of what he's going to present. The reason is, we went over it today, and there's a lot of information on this, a lot of numbers. We tried to make it as least confusing as possible, but still there's some points in there. As you're going through it, these are the points of reference I want you to know right up front. Once again, it's a very quick executive summary I'll give you right now. We're not going to put this up yet because he'll put the presentation up once he gives the more detailed one in about 5 minutes. This way you can ask him the questions, because I'm sure there will be many. I just want to give you some numbers to think of as he's going through this.
When you say he's going to put this up?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not going to put it up because the questions really shouldn't be directed at me. They should be directed at him when he goes into much greater detail. So once again, this was prepared by Brian Sylvia over the past week, and it's a fiscal impact to the town of South Kingstown on a possible $150 million bond for a new high school project. And it's in full transparency. As we're having this discussion, we need to put this out there so that the residents, the taxpayers, and everyone understands what this decision would entail. So this is a projected fiscal impact. Of course, things could change, and there are some assumptions built in here that we've made based on past estimates that the town has had over a period of time, especially the last 5 years. So the first thing is, number one, the presentation will be on a $150 million school bond comparison. It'll have a 20-year amortization and a 30-year amortization, so that you can compare if it's worth it as a policy to go to that extra 30 years and have the rates come down a little on what we're paying. But one thing I will tell you right up front, so that when we were talking about the $125 million bond, we were estimating on a 3.75% bond, which we would borrow at. That rate has since gone up to approximately 4% for a 20-year for $150 million. It's gone up about 0.25%. But a 30-year bond, the estimate goes higher. It's a 4.5% interest rate that we would be charged. And as you know, nothing is for nothing. And if you go 20 to 30 years, you will have an approximate $40.7 million increase, a liability to the town in those payments for those 10 years. So on a 20-year amortization on a $150 million bond, I'll get right to the punchline. The tax rate increase, this is for the bond only over a 5-year period, will be approximately 91 cents on the tax rate for every $1,000 in valuation to your home. The levy change, percent change, would be approximately 8.33% of the tax rate. But that is just the bond only. You're going to get a comparison of what the bond only, the impact would be, fiscal impact. But then again, I asked Director Sylvia to do the operations impact as well, so the taxpayer could truly see what, what he could see, he or she could see as a tax rate increase over a 5-year period with the bond and the operations of the town. So what are the operations of the town? What does that mean? It means everything that takes to keep everything running here. Personnel, capital, roads, infrastructure, everything that goes along with that. So once again, $150 million school bond, 20-year amortization. The tax rate increase on the bond only is 91 cents per thousand. The levy change would be 8.33%. If you include operations at a growth rate of 1.67% per year, which is an average, the tax rate increase would be projected to be $1.94 per thousand and an 18.61% increase. That's on a 20-year. If you go to the average price of a home in South Kingston right now is $468,300. That's right off the press from the tax assessor. So on a 20-year amortization, $150 million bond only, the person with a $468,000 house, it would go up approximately $426 over that 5-year period. And then we have a schedule you'll see once we put it up that'll go from $300,000 assessed value to $1 million assessed value. So you can put your house in whatever you think your house is worth and right in there, and you can figure out what your taxes would be. Let's go to 30-year. On a $150 million school bond on a 30-year amortization, the tax rate increase on bond only would be 75 cents per $1,000 of assessment of your house. It went down 16 cents compared to the 20-year amortization. The levy percent change would be 7.02% increase. If you include operations over that same 5-year period, once again, personnel, roads, infrastructure, capital improvements, the tax rate increase on a 30-year amortization is $1.78 per thousand, and the levy percent change would be 17.24%. So on that same $468,000 home, your estimated projected taxes after that 5-year period would be $354 more per year. Then we're going to, the director will talk about, we hear a lot of questions come in, well, how much can this town bond? What is the number? And he also calculated that number. I'll give it to you very quick, but it's more detailed once he explains it. The net assessed value of all properties in the town of South Kingstown as of December 31st, 2022, is $6,899,000,000. We are allowed a 3% debt limit. That is a best practice. So that means the town could bond based on that 3% of the net assessed value of $206,992,000. There's a page that Director Sylvia will go over where there are 9 assumptions that we're making in these projected estimates. So I will now, so now you have these numbers in your head, you've written them down, some of you, and I'll have Brian go over this same thing that I just read from, and he will get in more detail, and then you can ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Jim. So unfortunately, as the town manager started with and then mentioned, we did not start with the best of news. Our financial advisors have brought it to our attention that they had a recommendation for our bond, the assumed interest rate to go up. A bond buyer's 20-year index increased from 3.4% to 3.87% recently. And as such, there was a recent issuance for Portland, Maine. They did a 30-year bond issuance at 4.2%, 4.21. And Milford, Connecticut did a 20-year bond issuance within the last week at 3.87. And with that, they were recommending, both are very similarly rated to the town of South Kingston. They are recommending us, the town to go to 4% for 20 years and 4.5% for 30-year bond. So that was a bit of bad news to start, as that did increase the cost a bit. And I wanted to detail where that rate increase came from.
Before we go on, just a quick question. Can you refinance a bond? Like, say we pulled one and for 20 years and it was 4%, and then the rates changed 7 years from now. Can you refinance?
You can. It's not, I'd have to get more information on that. It's not as if we could sign the bond
It's not
today.
easy.
Well, it is, but it's you have to wait so many years, and it's different time frame.
Okay.
It just wouldn't be eligible for a few years.
Okay.
I'm not sure of the term right now, and they'd be different for either the 20 or the 30, but I can get back to you on that.
I just was curious, because
But that would certainly be eligible for it.
people can do that, so I
Yes.
didn't know.
Yeah, the town has taken advantage of that numerous times in the past.
Okay.
So on this sheet, the first page, you'll see the comparison on the 20-year and the 30-year bond. In terms of principal and interest payments, if the town elected to go with the 30-year bond, on an annual basis, the debt service payments would be reduced by $1,762,000. An offshoot of that, since we're paying less on an annual basis, we would also receive less state aid on an annual basis, so we would receive less state aid of $712,000 annually, which would result in overall reduction in our annual payments of $1,050,000 over the, well, that would be over the first 20 years of the bond, because comparing the 20 and the 30 year. However, when factoring all payments into the bond, a 20-year versus a 30-year, on the 30-year bond, the town would be approaching $41 million additional payments the town would be making on a 30-year bond because of the 10 extra years the town would be making these payments at a higher interest rate. So,
And Brian, that would be net of the reimbursement?
yes. Yes. Now, with that, I should point out, I do have that. A number of communities have done that recently. I had a note on, so there was a Projo article recently. Cranston, Cumberland, Barrington have all gone to a 30-year recently, and Warwick is looking into it. It's obviously, by these numbers, it's not ideal, but cities and towns are going that way if need be. I just wanted to put that out there. So that was actually an article in the Projo within the last week that those communities have gone with the 30-year, and Warwick is looking into it as well. So it's not, I mean, nobody wants to spend additional $40 million, but communities are doing it. I just wanted to put that out there to you as well. Next slide. So this is the $150 million bond at a 20-year amortization, how it would be rolled out. So the current debt service obligations, that represents the current debt service obligations for FY26 would actually be $1,565,000. We'd have bond payments, bond anticipation notes of $1,225,000, and I'm estimating using $200,000 from our debt service fund balance. Those numbers netted together would be the $2.5 million. That 2.5 million is north of what was in the operating budget for debt service in FY25, which was 1,644,000. The net of the delta between the 1.6 million and the 2.5, that's the additional funds you'd have to raise, the town would have to raise to achieve the 2.5 million. That's how got to the 946,000. And to do that, the town would have to increase the tax rate by 12 cents, which would be a levy increase of 1.22%.
Now, Brian, I want to ask you a few questions about existing debt that we have on the books that we're paying off. Is there current debt that will mature in the near time that will allow essentially freed up space to allocate debt service payments towards this instead of that?
Absolutely. The town has very little debt on the books, so it is retiring, and it's retiring rapidly, but the town has very little debt on the books, so you're not going to feel it much. But for example, in fiscal year 26, the town's, in fiscal year 25, the town's debt service obligations would be 1.6 million. In fiscal year 30, that number would be 1,060,000. So it's going down 600,000 in that 5-year, 6-year period. But again, with the numbers we're talking about on the bonds, it's not substantial. When you're talking about once the bond is rolled out and you're talking about a $7 million bond payment, it is helpful. It's there, and we are reducing debt. From fiscal year 26 to 27, the town's obligations currently, without this bond, is going down about $300,000. So we do have different years where we are going down, and every year we're going down at least slightly. So we are retiring debt. Right at the close of the current fiscal year we're in, the town will have just over 14,339,000 of obligations on the books. Again, for a town of this size, that is remarkably low. It's truly a position of strength for this town. But at the same time, it's also very helpful for cities and towns when taking on new debt, that you have debts that's getting retired as you take on new debt. We don't really have that. There's a pain right now, obviously, when taking on new debt. But yes, debt is getting retired.
Thank you.
One thing that will impact these figures and is not illustrated at all in any of this analysis, within fiscal year 26 and fiscal year 29, the town will be having, and required by law, a statistical reval. That will be a reshuffling of the deck where, in all likelihood, assessed values are going up and the tax rate will drop. I don't know at this time how much the assessed values will be going up or the rate will be going down, so we are essentially not reflecting that there will be a reval. So even when you see these numbers right now, I wouldn't anticipate these being the actual rates in these out years, because we will have a reval, and that will reshuffle the deck. So I just wanted to make sure everyone is clear on that.
But it's likely that the percentage would be similar, correct?
Yes. I mean, in all likelihood, how a reval should work is as the assessed values go up, the rate would go down and the town is made whole, yes. So as the town manager mentioned, for the 20-year amortization plan, you're looking at, on this scenario, this is bond only, as mentioned, a rate increase over the 5-year rollout of 91 cents, which is 8.33%. That is an average over the 5-year plan of 1.67%. I wanted to add in fiscal year 31, I wanted to draw the attention to fiscal year 30 and then to 31. Fiscal year 30, that would be, under this plan, the high watermark for the town. When you see the current debt obligations, $8,589,285, that is the high watermark. And you'll see in fiscal year 31 how it goes down to 88,000. So it will slowly start to decrease at that point, and that is the high watermark. So this is truly, I wanted to show the 5 years to really encapsulate how this is getting rolled out, and that it will then start to decrease. And again, that this is, as mentioned by the town manager, this is a plan, and subject to change. Obviously, this is based on many assumptions. But I wanted to get those points out, that it will start to decrease slowly over time after fiscal year 30. The next slide shows the impact on various assessed values based on the assessed values as of 12/31/2022. You'll see the current taxes for these assessed values for fiscal year '24 and where they would roll out, projected to roll out to in fiscal year '30 when the plan is fully rolled out. The median assessed value of the town right now is $468,300, and that property, a property valued at that amount, would be going up $426 from $5,175 to a projected $5,601. This is the very similar slide, but on the 30-year amortization plan.
Can I ask a question before
Yes.
you go on?
Sure.
I'm sorry, but my question refers to the slide just before this one.
Yep.
That one. That 8.3, sorry, I've put my mathematician's hat on. That 8.33% is based on the increases over those 5 years being compounded.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to use it as the example in class on Thursday.
And that is the bond-only version, the 8.33, but yes. Okay. Mhm. Sure. So on the 30-year, as noted, the actual rate increase sees a decrease over the 20-year by 16 cents from 91 cents to 75 cents, and the actual levy change of 702. That 702 equates to an average over those 5 years of 1.4%. And you'll note again, in fiscal year 31, there begins to be a drop-off on the debt service payments where it'll drop from 7.4 to 7.3, and that you'll slowly start to see the debt obligations of the town on an annual basis going down. This again is, oh, I'm sorry, I already mentioned that. I wanted to say again the average, but I already said that the average increase is 1.4% over those 5 years. And this is the impact for median, for the assessed values currently, how they would be impacted by this projection on the rate increase for the 30-year. Noting again the median assessed value at $468,300, you're looking at an increase over the 5 years of $354 from $5,175 to $5,528. The next slide shows, as mentioned, the legal debt margin. The only thing I wanted to add on this, the town manager did a nice job on this. The only thing I wanted to add, as noted here, I mentioned this earlier, so our current debt obligations within the current year is $14.3 million, and of that amount, 1.5 is subject to our debt limit. By 6/30/2027, the debt that we would have on the books would be $10,820,000, and the debt that is subject to the debt obligation would be just over $1 million. I bring this up because in all likelihood, the debt would be issued in fiscal year '28, so just to note what we'd have for actual debt on the books at that time, which would be very minimal. We'd have $1 million subject to the limit and $10 million overall outstanding. Excuse me. Here are some of the assumptions that we used in developing this plan. We had two scenarios, as mentioned previously, a 20-year amortization plan at 4% assumed interest, a 30-year amortization plan at 4.5% assumed interest, 52.5% state reimbursement on applicable expenses. We have assumed bond anticipation notes of $35 million in fiscal year '26, $85 million in fiscal year '27, and $149,580,000 in fiscal year '28, with the bond issuance assumed in fiscal year '28. This assumes annual growth of the tax base of the town. It assumes the use of debt service fund balance of the town, which by the close of this current fiscal year should be I'm on page 8. 2.3, almost $2.4 million we would have available in our debt service reserve that we could use as part of this plan to help smooth out the payments. The plan does not account for the scheduled revaluations, which would occur in fiscal year '26 and '29, and the town anticipates tax levy growth of approximately 1.67% annually to support town operations.
Say that one part again?
Yes. Sorry, number 9.
The part about
Last one?
The town.
So over the last 5 years, I'm sorry, I don't recall if I did 5 or 6 year average. I think I did the last 5 years. The town has averaged a levy increase of 1.67%, and I had used that going forward as an average for operational growth. And finally, these slides are very similar to the slides previously, although these slides account for both the implementation of a $150 million school bond on a 20-year amortization with the anticipated growth of the 1.67%. This would see a median assessed value home of $468,000 increased by $908 from $5,175 to $6,083. That makes up 8.33% related to the bond and 10.28 related to the town, equaling 18.61%. And on the 30-year version of this, so this would be a $150 million bond at a 30-year amortization, including estimated growth for operations. You would see the median assessed household home increase by $832 from $5,175 to $6,006. That, on this instance, has bond growth of 7.02, and again, the town at 10.22 for a 17.24 total.
17.24 tax increase?
Yes.
Wow. So
That is over 6 years.
right.
5
So
years of the bond and 6 years of the growth.
so basically, the community could anticipate within 5 years, basically a fifth quarterly tax payment? Comes quite close, right? Just 17%.
Right now, I don't think we're allowed, I'm just going with that. Right now, I don't think we're allowed on state law to do five payments. I think we can do 4.
Right, but if you're thinking about what that means
Yes.
to the community.
Yes, I just didn't mind, I didn't want to say that we were actually going to issue 5.
Right.
Bill.
I'm just, when you say 17%, it's basically like everyone could anticipate a fifth quarterly tax payment. Whatever your tax payment is for 1 quarter, you could be very quite close to that for the fifth. It's just coming to me as I'm looking at 17.
I understand, I didn't want you to think we were sending out, I just wanted to
Yeah.
say that. I understand.
That's eye-opening.
So, Brian, I got a few questions for you.
Okay.
I want to talk a little bit about the 20-year versus the 30-year.
Okay.
Now, obviously, the 30-year would free up the budget a little bit. It frees up about $1 million annual debt service. It allows for a lower tax increase over time, although not drastically different. Would a 30-year affect our credit rating differently than a 20-year?
No, it wouldn't affect our credit rating any differently. The one thing I would say is, right now, again, you're at $206 million for a debt ceiling, and this would put you at, you're not there. You have some room under it, but you're gonna be expending this debt over 30 years. It's gonna be a while before I think the town could take on a sizable project again, is what I was getting at. You're now amortizing this over 30 years. You're gonna be near your limit for a longer period of time.
So that debt limit includes interest?
Yes.
It does, okay. So the effect of a 30-year versus 20 years, it's
Oh,
sort
no,
of
no, I'm
bind up?
sorry. No, there's no
No, it does
impact on that.
not.
I'm sorry.
So it
No.
would not count toward that debt
No,
limit?
there's no impact on the debt limit. It's just you're paying it back that much longer. It's gonna take that much.
Okay.
You're paying the principal back that much
So it
longer.
really would not impair our ability to borrow in the future? A big
No.
project like this, the principal would be the same either way. Just one would have larger interest payments over time.
You would it would take that much longer to pay it off, so you wouldn't have that flexibility until longer into the future.
So the 30-year would free up $1 million in the budget each year. Over time, you pay a lot more in interest, about $40 million, and essentially has no impact on the ability to borrow more toward other projects in the future.
No.
You agree with all that?
As long as, you'd have to plan accordingly, yes.
Okay.
As long as you pushed if you have a
So
future.
you said when you started out, 30-year amortization is not ideal. I think you characterized it as. Why do you describe that as that?
Because the town would be paying an additional $40 million.
But you say that notwithstanding everything else we just stated here. Okay. Go ahead.
When you say that we won't be able to take on any projects for a long time, what does a long time mean?
Well, it depends on the project. Yeah, for the life of the bond, really. Well, it depends on the project, really. If you're taking on, like the last project the town did was I think 2 years ago, a $7 million project. You know, that's, I would say a sizable project like this. I don't think the town would be doing anything for some time.
Well,
Depends on the project.
I just think about some other buildings that we have that would then be aging 30 years. All our elementary schools couldn't be bonded, correct?
Correct.
Could or could not?
Why is it that they could not be bonded?
It could. I guess the way I'm interpreting this, too, I've asked these questions, is if there's $206 million bond capacity, you've used 150 of it for 20 years, and you can bond really much. You still have another 50 million in room, right? 56 million. But if you go to the 30 years, that's 10 more years where you
Yeah, you
still
couldn't
have
do
that
it. I
same
see.
amount. Where 20 years it stops, and you can bond a whole lot more if you want.
Yes.
So the downside would be the 30-year would just take longer for all that principal to be reduced, and that potentially could impair the space left for that debt, to reach that debt limit ceiling.
And it doesn't sound like it really makes it any bit more affordable.
Slightly. I mean, that's for this.
Right, right.
Oh, you know what, and I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that. We're talking amortization schedule now. This is not something that needs to be decided at this time. Should this body decide to go ahead with the bond and there's a referendum and it passes, we will be back before you at some point to issue the bond, and at that point, we will be talking about an amortization. We're talking about it now so we understand the cost of the project, but this is not something that needs to be decided to get it on a referendum. That would be decided when the bond is issued.
Okay.
That's a good question.
Yep, go ahead.
I just wanted just a clarifying question as far as this is the assumption that no other payments are being made. We're not paying down as we're going. This is just a straight, like if I was going to buy a house today, this is a spreadsheet that I would run to get my numbers to make sure I know that over 30 years I can afford this. But it does not include the assumption that as we're moving along and 5 years into it, if all of a sudden we sell a building or a large business starts up and we have extra money that can start to pay the bond down faster. None of that is factored into this, but it is possible.
Absolutely. And just as the councilwoman mentioned, for bond refunding at a later date as well, yes.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Michelle.
To go back to the debt limit, so no matter which, and I know the decision on 20 years or 30 years is down the road, but I want to have this. So as we begin to pay off the bond, okay, when we get to and I know in the beginning all we're paying is interest, I get that. When we get to the point where we're paying down the principal of that, does that then add to what we are capable of? Does that add to our debt limit? In other words, we've got approximately $200,000 debt limit. $200 million debt limit. And we're going to use about 150 of it. That leaves us $50 million wiggle room, right? So if we've paid off $50 million of the bond, does that add to what we can then bond in the future for some future project?
Yes.
Even though we're still paying,
Right.
but we've paid down the principal?
Yes.
Okay.
The other thing that will change that on every year on an annual basis, again, I shouldn't say every year, historically, assessed values will go up and the debt limit will go up. I don't have a crystal ball on that, but that will continue to raise as well. So.
Carol, go ahead.
So, first of all, I just want to say thank you for the great analysis. I just want to ask you about the assumptions. So on number 4, these are cumulative numbers, correct? So between 26 and 27, you're actually issuing 50 million additional bonds?
Those are one year, so bond anticipation notes. So those would be issued Because until the bond is actually issued in, say, '28, the current construction would be ongoing, we would have construction costs to pay, we'd have to pay for it. So this would enable us to have the funds to pay for the project, and it also is easing in the burden of the bond as well. So, but these would be one-year bond anticipation notes. So the one in '26 for $35 million would be 1 year, then we'd issue another one in '27 estimated at $85 million, and then the last one, right before we issue the actual bond.
Okay, great, thank you. So how does the reimbursement schedule work? When does the state reimburse us the 52.5%?
When we start paying back on the bond. It wouldn't be on the bond anticipation notes, it'd be on the actual bond. So estimated, if we issue in fiscal year '28, in fiscal year '29, we'd start paying, and we would start receiving reimbursement.
So it wouldn't be on the 1-year paybacks, though?
No.
All right, thank you. So on number 6, assumes the annual growth of the tax base of the town. So what rate did you use for that?
Approximately 20 million, which was a little conservative. But at the same time, last year was a reval year, so and it really shot it up. Last year was a big year for the town in terms of assessed values, but approximately 20 million.
So, but the town council's making a lot of movement into multiple zoning in town and affordable housing, so that could actually be more than that.
Could be.
So these numbers could actually be a better scenario if we grow
Yeah,
the tax base.
it's an assumption at this point, yeah.
And so you talk about the debt service being smoothed by the $2 million in the debt service reserve fund. But we also have some other funds that we talked about before, the school endowment funds, and some. So again, have those other funds been figured into smoothing this debt service?
This is solely taking on the debt at this time. No, they have not. But they
So again, these numbers could be lower.
if the town elects to do that, yes.
All right, and then I just have another question.
And just referring to those funds again, it's very common when those funds are referred to that there's roughly 20 million, I think, in the school and school trustees fund. I think 90% of that, or just over 19 million, is related to the guild. So it's not a big chunk of money. I know it sounds, when you hear the school trustees funds, the number itself is very large, but 90+%, just over 90% of that is related to the guild.
Yeah, I sat as a trustee of those funds, so I am aware. But there is a fund particularly for Wakefield School
There is.
that
And
I
there's-
think
there's one for
is
high
not needed, so that, we really need to look at those funds.
Yep.
Yeah, but there is some money there.
Isn't there one for the high school, Carol? Isn't there a high school one?
There is.
There is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so there's a couple.
Right. And there's some scholarship funds, which we wouldn't want to touch for this purpose. So, I totally understand. But my point is, I think that this analysis is really great, and I love that you've written out the assumptions so that, because the numbers are built on the assumptions, and if we make different assumptions, we end up with different numbers. So the other question I have is in the original bond, my understanding was the $9 million pay-go was used to fund debt service. So how are we looking at those $9 million funds now?
They are not within the debt service. They're could be used towards debt service, but they have been pulled out of the payments right now.
So again, if we used $9 million for debt service, these numbers would be much lower.
Could be.
And the other, I'm guessing, things that we could do with that $9 million, there's obviously, we need to talk about that because it could be used for other school projects, but it could be used to reduce the bond from 150 to 141. So, I think this analysis is great, but I think there are so many moving numbers, and other things that we need to discuss. But my big takeaway is that, we will not come close to that debt limit at all. And as Michelle was saying, as we pay down the loans, you build that amount that you can bond later. Also, if we're growing at 1.67%, that actually will add to that what you can bond. So I think Rory's question was good. Are we going to hammer ourselves in by not being able to do projects later? I don't think we are for all three of those reasons. But I just think that I'm really glad we're having this conversation about how to pay for the bond, because I don't think we should just grab a number that, of what we need to bond, that we need to understand where that number comes from. Maybe it's 141, maybe it's not 150. Maybe we want to have the legislation for 150 with the assumption we never really want to bond for that whole amount. But these are the conversations that we need to have. So thank you so much.
Just if I could.
Go ahead, Brian.
Just why the PAYGO was left out. As you saw earlier tonight, the school right now is projected at 153 million, which is already north of the 150. Part of the reason why we wanted to leave the PAYGO out. So we have, if we need a cushion in there, we have that. Or if we don't need it, it could certainly go towards the debt. But that was the thinking there. And on the 1.67, yes, we'd be looking at, we're anticipating a levy increase of 1.67. That's not all on the assessed values. I mean, assessed values would be going up on an annual basis, but some of that is also rate. So it's not, the assessed value is all going up 1.67. But yes.
One more point, Brian, to follow up on Kate and Carol's questions about assumptions. This also doesn't include any contribution or payment by the town from its own surpluses.
That's correct.
Okay. And I'm not sure who this question is for. I think it's either going to be Mike or Jim, but in terms of tax increases that are relatable to the school building project, how does that interact with the state limit, state cap on yearly increases?
Right, that's the 4% you're referring to, and if we're
Yes.
going to go above the 4%, we have to get permission, and bonded indebtedness would be one of the categories that would supply an exemption.
So is it like an exception, or do we actually have to ask the?
Oh, no, we have to ask, apply, show a lot of financial documents to prove that there's no other way to do it, et cetera. It's not just checking off a box.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions for Brian? All right, thank you, Brian. We're going to move on now to the next item here. Review of school data to include current and projected student enrollment, staffing FTEs, and other operational data. Mr. Superintendent, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. President, and happy to be here representing South Kingstown School Department, and I'm ably assisted with our interim assistant superintendent, Ms. Alexis Meyer. We've been on the job since August, and it's been a great learning curve for us. It was made clear to me early on in my tenure that relations between the school department and the town management has not been as amicable as people would have liked, and there have been a number of requests of me to provide information that was perhaps hard to come by in the past, and the words that I've tried to live by over the last couple of months have been to be transparent, truthful, and cooperative, as transparent as I can be. I know that there have been a number of requests for information into the school department's business, so the request came about enrollment and FTEs, and I've provided in the packet for this evening quite a bit of information about our enrollment, including our most current enrollment tracker that shows the number of students enrolled in South Kingstown schools, what school they're in, what the class sizes are in our elementary schools, and I've also supplied a tracker for to compare this year to last. And you'll notice that over the last year, our total enrollment has gone down by 169 students, about a 6.7% decrease in enrollment. If you look at other information I've supplied for you, that does not make us particularly unusual in New England, as all New England states are experiencing decreases in enrollment, while some individual districts may grow. The overall trend is that student enrollment is down. You will notice that if we look at the projections that were done for the school department a year ago in December, you'll see from the New England School Development Council, you'll see that there is a projected flattening of the curve, if you will, that while enrollment has decreased rapidly over the last few years, it's projected to level off. A couple of things that I'll point out to you are, if you look at last year's graduating class from South Kingstown High School, I think there were 225 students that graduated last year. Those students exited. We have 119 students in kindergarten right now, and 177 students in first grade. So you can see that clearly enrollment is decreasing, but according to NESDEC, that decrease in enrollment is projected to level off in the next few years. I would also point out to you that I know that there are a number of people who raise the issue. They don't understand if enrollment is decreasing, why isn't there what they perceive to be a commensurate decrease in our expenditures? And I'll just point out one thing to you. And if you look at our enrollment tracker for October of 2023, you'll see that there's a total of 232 students in the district who could be attending South Kingstown schools, but are choosing to attend schools outside the district, either charter schools or career and technical education programs that aren't in South Kingstown. While they choose to attend other schools outside the district, South Kingstown is still responsible for the tuition for those students. There's lots of data there about our enrollment, and you see that enrollment has decreased. But you can also see, looking at our full-time equivalents in the district has responded. I've provided you with a spreadsheet that shows all of the FTEs currently working in the district, and for comparison purposes, you can look at the number of FTEs who were working in the district a year ago. What we have done here is we've compiled this list. It shows all of our people from superintendents to teachers, custodians, clerks, and teachers' aides. I felt it important to show that not all FTEs are funded in the same way. That while most are funded out of the general fund, we have a number of people who are working in the district who are funded by grants from either the state or the federal government. So I felt that was important to point out. One thing that I will point out about those grant-funded positions is that the funding source for a number of those people is from ESSER funds. And the last grant, ESSER 3, is scheduled to expire in September of 2024. So those people who are working in our district now are providing essential services in support in special ed and in math and English intervention. They're providing essential services, and if they're going to continue to provide those essential services, we're going to have to find some way to assimilate them into our general fund budget for next year. I know there's a lot there's a lot of data there, but hopefully it shows that we're willing to be open and transparent about one, the students that are attending schools in our town, and two, the people who are working in our town. Another thing that we're working on that FTE list is that we're compiling a list that shows every person who's working in the district, what their salary scale is, what their health cost scale is, what any stipends they receive for advanced degrees, et cetera, so that we'll be able to identify every person who works in the district and what there is what cost it is to the district, and also the funding source for that cost.
Thank you, Bob. I got a quick question for you.
Yes,
since
please.
we're on the topic. Now, if I'm interpreting the spreadsheet right, looks like you got a reduction in FTEs that are funded through the general fund of about 34. What does that equate to in savings?
What does that equate to in savings?
Yeah, it looks like you got a reduction in FTEs, 34 FTEs, from one year to the next, all of which funded through the general fund.
Where do you see that? So we can all see the same thing.
I see it on the last page.
Yep.
You see the 408, less the 374.
What year is that, though?
22-23 versus 23-24. It stands out to me, so I asked the question to you, Bob.
So you're looking at the total FTEs for 426.7 in
I'm looking at total FTEs funded through the general fund, so that's 408.
Yes.
You look at that same column for the following year, you got 374.
Yes.
That's about a 34 FTE reduction, and I'm asking you, what does that equate to in savings?
Offhand, I can't.
Approximately.
I can't tell you. Well, approximately for a teacher, and I showed you in my other in my other report. If you look at if we reduce a teacher who's a fifth step teacher with a master's degree, then that comes out to about $64,000 for that teacher. And
that's just salary, right?
That's their
you get benefits
that's
as well?
their salary plus their benefits, their contributions to their retirement, et cetera.
Okay. So you want to give an approximate there? Or?
I would misspeak. I know I would.
All right.
But I would be happy to provide that figure for you tomorrow.
All right.
So
Go ahead.
let's just write that down, what we want, because I think that's a good question that Rory has. So what is the savings from that reduction? Is that the simplest? Okay. So
And I mean, what I was prepared to present. You did ask. There was a question. You closed Curtis Corner Middle School. You closed Wakefield Elementary School. What kind of savings was realized from those reductions? And so you can look at those and get an idea of what kind of reductions you realize when you reduce staff. And you can look there, and there are teachers and librarians and custodians and clerks. So just from those reductions, you can see that it's over $1 million in savings.
So, all right, Bob, we're still on the student enrollment and FTEs.
Yes.
Before we get there.
He's here, but he's talking about this.
Okay.
Wow, it's already 7:30.
All right, any
Oh, God.
questions for Bob on this?
I'm just gonna, you don't have to answer, but I personally have concerns that you have 26 grant-funded positions that, when you say might go away,
Yes.
well, the funding will go away, but I think I'm hearing you say you'd like to keep some of them.
The funding will go away for positions there that are funded with ESSER money.
Right,
That is destined to expire in September.
right. So,
Yeah, right. Yeah, but not all of those.
not all of them.
positions that are-
Some will go away, and you will then be trying to recoup those positions into the budget somehow.
Those are the decisions that we're going to have to be making over the next few months. But some of those positions that are grant funded are funded by Title I, Title II money, IDEA money.
Oh,
But
is
it's the ESSER funds that are going to expire.
Will any of the Learn 365 funds be available to replace some of those educators?
Learn 65 funds are strictly operating outside of the school department. Those are funds that are set aside for municipal programs, and the grant now that's being administered by the Johnny Cake Center and URI. We're certainly cooperating with them, but that operates outside the school department.
All right, any questions for Bob on this one? Down there? All right, we're going to move to the next one, Bob, which is also you. Briefing regarding the current school budget to include any surplus fund balances. Go ahead.
I draw your attention to the memo that was issued to me that I've included in tonight's packet. I'm going to thank our co-chief financial officer, Anthony Ferrucci, who's been working with us since September. Mr. Ferrucci has been focused on the 2023 budget, closing that out and getting that ready for audit. So he has prepared this report. I want to say we're hours away from being prepared to submit it for audit. There's just one small piece that we're trying to determine whether there's about $60,000 up for a program, whether that can be charged to a grant or should it be charged to the general fund. The bottom line from that Mr. Ferrucci has presented to me and to the school committee is that we've got about $3.5 million in unspent grant funds from a variety of sources. And he's also predicted that when 2023 closes out, that there would be a total surplus of $915,000, with $621,000 relegated to the capital expenditure fund, leaving a net surplus for 2023 of $294,000, which would bring our unrestricted fund balance as of the end of fiscal year 2023 to $2,981,285.
And Bob, what are your, I guess the school committee and you question, what would be your plans as to use of the 2.9 that would sit in this unfunded, undesignated balance here?
For the unfunded balance?
Sorry, the undesignated fund balance.
For the fund
2.9
balance?
million.
I would turn to the school committee and say I'm willing to exercise your will as to
I understand you.
what we would use those funds for.
You maintain a process by which the balance is always maintained at a certain minimum, and 2% of the overall budget. Is that correct? Something like that.
I believe school committee policy says that aspirational is between 2% and 3% to maintain in a fund balance.
Where does this fit?
What's
How,
the number
how high is
come
this?
out to?
Do you know? Can you quantify that quick?
Million?
You can do that on a calculator, right?
Can I quantify where we would be close to that with 3 million?
Looks like it'd be above, no?
That's what I was at. I'm turning to Carol and saying the same thing. What's 2% of the best practice budget come out to in numbers? Money. 1.2 and 1.8? So 3 is 1.8? Okay.
So, yeah, we just got this yesterday. We have a lot of building requirements. Article 9 requires us to spend 3% of our budget on building maintenance, and we have a lot of deferred maintenance. So my guess is that a proportion of this will go to capital funds. We still have improvements to make at Broad Rock that weren't done yet, so there's some of that still residual work to do. Again, we just got this, we haven't really discussed it yet. But again, of the 2.9, we're probably looking at only $1 million of it really available to spend because of our policy.
And that policy is based on best accounting practices for school departments.
So maybe some flexibility, maybe not.
So
To put it better
I think what everyone's trying to ask is there funds available? Like you pointed out that we know we have 2.4 in the debt reserve fund. You might have 1 million in your fund balance along with maybe $1 million with the trustees in the school. I mean, there is money.
Right, I mean, this is, how do you want to allocate this in the budget process is really what it comes down to, what you want to allocate it for. And again, we have contractual obligations that will be increasing at a rate of 2%, so that has to be figured in the 25 budget. Our healthcare insurance went up 9% last year. We're hoping it's not that much again, but so could this be used, some of it for operational costs? Those will be discussed, I'm sure, in our budget subcommittee. I mean, the 7 of us have really tried to be good stewards of taxpayer money. We have closed 2 schools in 2 years, in savings of $1.5 million during that process. We have been able to have level funding for 4 years because of cost cutting and being very aware of how we're spending taxpayer money. I mean, I think that we all are very careful on what we come to ask you in an appropriation. So, we'll be looking at how to allocate this where, you're never going to get to zero when you're going to have some surplus, right? Because you can't run a deficit. So was it, it was roughly 300,000 more than we thought it was going to be. That's great news. And it does give us some ways to look at how we want to allocate that savings to the next year. So you're absolutely right, Deb. But again, we just got this news yesterday, but it is good news.
Mm-hmm.
All right, any other questions?
Well, I would also point out that we have a capital improvement plan that reaches out over 5 years, and Ms. Bergner mentioned that we have other schools in the district that are going to be aging while the new high school is being built. So there's definitely going to be needs there.
All right, thank you, Bob. Any other questions on this one? All right, we're going to move on to the next one, Bob. We got discussion of estimated cost savings related to the closing of Curtis Corner Middle School and Wakefield facilities. Go ahead.
So I tried to quantify our savings as we closed Curtis Corner Middle School, moved grades 7 and 8 over to Broad Rock. We closed Wakefield School, which in the previous year we had moved kindergarten and grade 4 into the elementary school. So the last movement at Wakefield School was to move the preschool program and from the Wakefield building to the Peacedale building. So these are the actual reductions that were realized in the teaching force, the custodial force, the librarians, in one case nurses. I tried to delineate all of the costs, the salary, the health insurance, the contributions to the retirement system, Medicare, et cetera. I also looked at operating costs. Brian Mahoney, our facilities director, and I looked these over. These are very conservative figures on savings that we would realize on operational. For services, I looked at what was budgeted for these schools in fiscal year 2023, and then for utilities, we just said let's predict a 50% savings in utilities. We've got to keep the buildings lit and somewhat heated, so let's count on a 50% reduction in our utilities in those two buildings, and then you'll see that the approximate savings based on what was budgeted last year, $1,530,000. Add on to that the negotiated salary increases that would have been in effect had we kept those schools open in 23-24, along with the healthcare increases that we would have incurred in 23-24. So we would be spending roughly $1,565,000 if we were to continue with those schools.
All right, Bob, I got a question here. I'm trying to sort of understand what you're getting at here. So this $1.5 million in savings, this relates to the fiscal year 23-24, which we're currently in?
Yes.
Okay. You got this 1.5 increase here that nets it out? So there's no savings? Or what do you have here?
I thought it was, that's what they would have spent had those staff been there.
That's what you would have had to spend.
That's what we would have had to have spent if we incurred for these people the 2% salary increase and the health care increase.
Okay.
So I guess the $1 million question is, did you save $3 million?
No. $1.5 million.
Why aren't these numbers the same?
Well, they're two different things.
The approximate savings of $1,530,000 are based on what was budgeted for fiscal year 2030.
It didn't account
the
for
bottom
the 2%
line, and I
increase.
apologize if I included that bottom line and made it confusing. I apologize for that. The bottom line would be taking the $1,530,000 and adding on to that the 2% salary increase that would have been in effect going into this year, and the health care increase going into this year.
So for fiscal year ending 2024, there should be another anticipated surplus in the budget related to this 1.5 million in savings.
We're working on fiscal year 2024 right now with our other co-chief financial officer, Mr. Crowley. So we'll have a better picture of that in November. If I do point out the $1.5 million savings here, I also have to look at everyone else who is working in the district who received a 2% increase in salary and we had a 9% increase in healthcare costs for everyone else who's working in the district.
So that could offset these savings pretty good.
That could offset these pretty well, yes.
Okay. Go ahead.
I just want to point out these numbers, because we were closing Wakefield and Curtis, were not in our budget for FY 23-24. So this is money we didn't have to ask you for to cover those schools. Yeah. Yeah, the savings were worked into the budget of the FY 24.
You use the savings in the budget.
Yeah, so we didn't have to go, we asked for level funding because we were able to close these schools and save that money. We were able to ask for level funding.
All right.
This was very helpful. I don't think we've gotten this much information in one setting, so I thank you, and thank Mr. Crowley and Mr. Ferrucci and anyone else who had compiled all of this for us. I think
There's a number of people
Yeah.
who have been helpful in this effort.
Do you agree? Do you think it's helpful to have all of this information? We've never had all of this, so thank you. Thank you.
Happy to oblige.
Yes, thank you very much.
And we look forward to a good working relationship going forward into the budget season.
Thank you.
All right. Any questions for Bob on this? All right, we're going to move on here. Next item is discussion and potential action regarding the proposed school building project and associated bond to finance construction. I don't believe there'll be any action taken tonight, but this has been very informative and will help us in deciding which direction to go here, considering everything we've been presenting tonight. So, any general thoughts at the table? Go ahead.
I'm going to go out on a limb, and I think we all really want the project to happen. We read your emails. We got a lot of emails about how important it is. I think we all know the project is super important to families and the community. I think that we all agree on, even if we don't agree on everything else. We all are behind the high school. I think we need to talk about how we're going to pay for it. You know, when I said earlier, it looks like we could tell the residents, you could be just consider it's a fifth quarter that you'll pay on your taxes. We don't want to say that. We need to work together, figure out what money we can come to reduce that impact. Will there be an impact? Yes. It's our responsibility as the leaders and decision makers to do right by all the people that have to pay for it and do the hard work to get that to not look like the fifth quarter and to be much less. That's how I feel, but I want everyone to hear that we need a high school. It's time.
I agree completely with Deb, and I feel much more reassured, especially hearing that there are a lot of ways that, a lot of different pots of money that we can sort of hopefully allocate towards this project, so to alleviate the cost to the taxpayers. So my interest is in just making sure that every dollar that we can allocate to this, or every dollar that we can get from a grant or anybody else, gets put towards the project. That's my priority.
I think we're unanimous that the project needs to happen. We just have to figure out how to finance it. I think there's been a tremendous change in confidence in the information being provided by the school committee, the school building committee, to help us make the decision. And I agree with Rory. It's not to be made tonight. We haven't heard yet from the public who are here, and that's the next part of the meeting. But we have a 70-year-old high school that we prioritized back in March for some kind of effort. It's not going to get any younger. Construction costs are not going to come down tremendously Hopefully, they will come down somewhat. Maybe even interest rates will come down somewhat. I think some of this is always going to be a moving target, but there's been a tremendous amount of effort, and thank you very much for everybody that has been working on this.
Thank you, Mike. I'll just say, it's been a priority of mine. It's been a priority of my fellow council members here to find a way to get a new high school project done and on a referendum and hopefully moved forward. I feel good about how this meeting has gone so far. I think it's been good collaboration with the school department, school committee, and we've gotten a lot of information that we haven't in the past, so I feel very good about that. I think there's been a lot of options presented tonight as to different sources of funds to tap into to help get a project to this magnitude on track. And, I think I'm hopeful that we can find a path to get there, and just have to think on the information we have now and reconsider, hopefully in a few months. So.
Sorry, one sec.
Go ahead.
So just to follow up on what Patty Alley said about grants, we recently hired a grant writer. Is there anyone in your skill set that could work on that so that Patty's hopes and dreams come true, that we get every grant dollar possible? I'm going to shake every cushion we can.
One of the things that Mr. Ferrucci included in his report to the committee, based on his experience at working as a chief financial officer in a number of districts in Rhode Island, is that the districts that are most successful at procuring grants and managing grants have someone on staff, like an assistant superintendent, who has that responsibility, and that there is someone who's designated as the manager of the records, of keeping track of the funding sources, et cetera. One of the reasons why you look at the balance of the grant funds that we have on hand is that there has not been an assistant superintendent in the district for, Ms. Brousseau, you have that.
When did Pauline leave?
Since June
4 years?
30th, June
Yeah,
30th,
Pauline.
2019.
And
Wow.
I can say that after just a couple of months, the district has benefited greatly from having Ms. Meyer in this position as an interim, and it's really pointed out a glaring void that we have,
Right.
that needs to be filled.
All right.
Before we go to public, I just, and Chris Spiegel, I may ask you for an assist on this. I know you're not going to make a decision tonight, and I know that the public still needs to communicate with us. However, I'm hoping we can have like a timing, like real quick timing conversation, because it can't go too long without a decision and without us knowing what the number is going to be up to 150 million, because as everybody's pointed out, we may not need the full 150, right? There's a lot of contingencies packed into it, so we want to make sure, obviously, the wording's right, but also the timing is right, if we can get that information.
So happy to address the council and the public. Mario Carreño, the Chief Operating Officer of RIDE, I spoke with him last week. He is currently out this week. He's finishing up his dissertation for his PhD, but on Monday or Tuesday of next week, he'll be sending the chair a letter which will state that the final due date, the drop dead date for this council to have made a decision by. Otherwise, they will no longer be reviewing our Stage 2 application. It is expected that that date is probably with the second week of November, the third week of November, before Thanksgiving, certainly. So the reason that we have so much, the reason we've actually been able to take this pivot and to take this step back and to take this time to look at it was because prior to Left Field being brought on board, the school department and the school building committee and the town council did a great job of getting their Stage 2 in well ahead of time. That's what gave us this float in the schedule. However, the decision needs to be made on what the top number of the bond will go up to by probably the third week of November at the very latest.
All right, let's get on the agenda for the first meeting in November.
So, but we can do that, but we still, I think we all heard We're worried about how we're going to pay for it. So we need to get sharpened pencils. We need to figure out what we need to collaborate and have a better sense of. We're not just going to bond the whole thing. There's a little money over here. There's a little money over here. We're going to take money from over here, right?
I completely agree with you on that, Deb, but at the same time, the community, we need to be able to put something out there that the community can vote on, and we have a drop dead date. This meeting was, in my opinion, is so helpful, and it was so needed, but it should have happened 3 weeks ago, right? Or 2 weeks ago, or 1 week ago, but it happened today, and this is where we are. But we're pushing ourselves up against, once again, we built all this wiggle room in, and we sucked it all up. So we need a decision, and unfortunately, we only have a few weeks for it.
I know.
Agreed, and that was the point of having this meeting. Like, yes, we need to sharpen our pencils, doing it, working on it, but we also need that bond legislation so that our community can have their voices heard.
Right. For the whole community, we met a month ago and asked for the meeting, and it happened. We have shown up every time we would have 100 special meetings for this project, and it took a month to happen. So we were waiting then. So we're not
We'll be
we're not
prepared
slow
to have a
walking.
vote November. We'll be prepared to vote November.
One thing I did just want to mention before we go to public comments is that I know there's been some discussion in the past about, and there's always discussion about our student population numbers and the declining number of students. And I just sort of want to reassure the town that the council is working diligently on increasing the supply of housing, smaller starter homes. And I firmly believe that once we get this wonderful new high school, we've got new housing, I think that we're going to have more students. So I feel very optimistic about it. And I just want people to understand that the big picture, it's not just the high school that we're working on. We're also working on housing and all of those other things. So it's a big picture that we're looking at. So,
Thank you, Patty. Go ahead, Mike.
One more aspect to what Kate was talking about, the need for a final decision, is we're also facing a time deadline with respect to the legislature. Representative McEntee put the bond legislation in last time. I've already talked to her about getting her a new one, and she's indicated that she's willing to work to get a very early hearing at the legislature and maybe even pre-file the legislation so that when the legislature starts January 1, it can be put on a fast track, because we still have to have, whatever the number is, we have to have a bond vote by the taxpayers of South Kingstown, and assuming that it's positive, we have to have contracts at least ready before June 30. So we're still on a tight time frame in that respect as well, and we're very well aware of that.
So are we going to have, I think we should have an additional work session or some conversation where we see some of the information we're asking for. This can't be the only time we talk about how we're going to fund the project, right? You're nodding. We should have a work session before the 14th, or have a special meeting and vote on it after we get some information, because we don't have much. You're nodding, so. Yeah, we are, I think we tend to be the big picture thinkers about what's the whole project, what's the whole town going to look like, and how we're going to pay for this, and what are we doing over here. So I think you're nodding for a work session. I don't know how we work that out, if it's the school committee or the school building committee.
Pick a date, it'll get done. Just do it now, rather than going back and forth. Just pick a date you
I think
want.
we got to think it through, look at our calendars, figure it out. I'm not prepared to.
In
I'm
all
not
fairness to
prepared
the school department, they're going to need some time to prepare.
There's November 6th. There's November 7th.
I like Bob.
What?
Just pick a date, we'll figure it out.
There you go.
No.
Our meeting is the 14th, so we can meet the 6th,
Why is it not the 13th? The Monday.
holiday, state holiday, Veterans Day.
So pick, so pick the Monday before and we'll do it then.
The 6th.
We'll do it tomorrow?
We just need to keep,
Okay, thank you. You want the 6th?
yeah, I mean,
I'm not prepared to commit to the 6th right now.
No?
well, we can commit to
Let's
anything.
gather information.
That's the
go
point.
from there.
Exactly. We
Find a
don't-
date after that. All right?
Can we pre-supply the information?
Yeah, sure. Resupply it.
I mean, you've asked the
Earlier you
question.
get it, the more
They've written down
flexibility you have.
they've written down the questions. My guess is they can get you an answer in a couple days. It doesn't need to be, it should be presented in a public meeting, but for you guys to start digesting it and having conversations and sorting out, and us, it doesn't always have to happen in, 4 weeks from now in a work session.
Yeah, and I'd like to offer a contrary opinion. I'm not sure that we need a work session with all three groups again. We're at the point where we need a final decision from the council. Anybody that wants to contribute or put in 2 cents worth at the next council meeting can do so, and can do so before, and you can email us. But we need to make a decision.
Well, the information we're looking for is what sources of contribution exist and what would be contributed to the project. No? That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Yes? I got
All right, let's
a couple of
get-
yeses over there. So,
No.
I would say that that's a fair question, and at the same time, I think we've done our due diligence to project those numbers to date right now. There were also some questions asked of your body that there were some of those assumptions that we don't have that information. And I also think tonight, some things that were not discussed are, I know some of your work recently in the council has been to look at properties like South Road and Curtis Corner. So we haven't heard that side of the conversation from you all, how some of those cost savings might also support taxpayer relief as well.
so when we talked about that at the council meeting a couple of times, there's the cost of demolition to South.
Wait, we're getting off track. Mike Ursillo. We don't have this on the agenda. Is there a problem here or no?
It's all financing of the bond.
I think you're still good. The agenda was pretty broad.
Okay.
What I don't know, though, is you, based upon the meetings I've been, you don't have an answer to that question.
Right.
Correct.
Right. But it would be a cost to prepare the site. It's not like a fee simple transfer. We're going to sell it for $5 million and here goes that project.
Melissa, it's not a stretch to say we're not going to know that answer until March, April of next year. And that was my point earlier. There are a lot of moving targets on here. We're never going to have every single question answered to the last penny, but we have to make a decision.
All right.
That's the concern. That's just and I'll stop. It's just my final concern is if we need a decision, is it going to be up to 150? It doesn't have to be 150. It doesn't have to be 155. It's just up to 150, and so we can get the legislation written so that we can let our community vote. That's my last point. Sorry.
All right. All right, we're going to move on to public comment now. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for coming. Anyone in the audience who wishes to speak, I invite you to come on up. And we just ask you to identify yourself. We're going to limit you to 5 minutes. So with that said, first come, first serve. Come on up.
He's heading out.
Really bad at using microphones because I'm just a really loud person. Hi, I'm Katie Garvin. I'm 53 Mountain Laurel Drive.
We have 3 children in the school district. All of these lovely people are very familiar with me. I come to a lot of their meetings. Just want to thank everybody for the time that's gone into this. Obviously, everyone agrees this is a huge priority for the town. We're people who moved here simply for the schools. We're so not alone. I think we just really need to stress again that importance of make the decision, will we get up to that 150 number so we can make this come to life? Because those numbers of children who are utilizing other schools, charter or CTEs in other public schools that our district is paying for, they just keep growing and growing and growing. And every time that we stand still and nothing changes, you just see more people, they lose their faith. They say, oh, I don't really feel like I have another option, or now this is going to take too long for my child to benefit from it, or I just feel like things can't get themselves together, and we're watching people just hemorrhage. That doesn't even account for people who are going to private school, and I think we all know it's very unlikely we get those children back into the public schools. So it's something I understand that from a taxpayer perspective, you can't just be like throwing out like, hey, surprise, now you're going to have all these big increases. But everyone knows that when you invest in your public schools, it increases everything around the livelihood of your town. It increases the value of your home in the long run. These are things that we need to show people who want to move to this town or who want to choose to stay in this town or who want to send their kids to these schools or not. We have to show this investment. People are running out of steam to keep fighting for the same things. And one thing I just want to point out that maybe I'm speaking out of turn, and this is coming from a passionate place as a parent, but when we look at the school system and we try to say, where else can we save money? Where can we nickel and dime from here and here? I think it's really important to point out that our current school functioning is down 2.5 mental health professionals from where it was last year. And that is a pretty big number when you take into account that we're still coming out of COVID times, and you can read pretty much anything that shows that anxiety, depression, and everything else related to social emotional well-being are just on the rise. So we're already talking about some pretty bare bones when it comes to the support services that are really the most important support services that we're supplying to our children in this town. So I just want to be really mindful of the fact that the people who are boots on the ground in the schools are working their rear ends off. We've got principals who are basically serving as one-to-one aides in buildings where there aren't enough TAs. You've got people running in a million different directions to try to support kids with really high needs. And so I just want to be mindful that sometimes in order to invest in the future and in order to invest in children and this town then as a whole, it's just not always going to be possible to go back to the school system and say, we need your portion, because they're already working at a pretty bare bones in a lot of ways, if you look at it in terms of supports to kids. So just can't possibly say enough how much we really want to see that number get to a school that's actually going to attract people to come to this town and stay in this town. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience, just feel free to come on up.
Jim O'Neill, Wakefield. A few thoughts. Today, the Treasury market, the 20-year bond closed at 5.25. 30-year bond closed at 5.01. I bring that up because in the real estate world, which I'm in, working your way down to a 15-year is always a better model than a 30-year. So I'm suggesting from my end of the world, I'd rather pay a little higher, pay off this bond a lot sooner. But those are my thoughts, but those are the current numbers. Those are the current numbers, and it'll be interesting when the bond is offered. Who knows where the yields will be then, and pricing and ratings, everything else. And it may cost us a little more because a buyer of these bonds may want call protection. Someone's going to want that yield for 20 years. And if you put a call protection in there that could call those bonds back after 5 years, they're going to ask for a lot more money, period. A couple other things which you forget about. I was on the council when the real estate market died back in 2008 through 2012. It was a very sad time. You think dozens of calls, hundreds of calls, people really hurting. And so I just would like to remind you that the current figures we're using are $468,000 for a medium-price home here in South Kingstown. In the 5th year, I think the number was $426 more would be the cost of that homeowner. Well, if this were 2008 again, that home would be $351,000, and that 426 would be current and still going up. So bear in mind here that prices always don't go up in real estate, because we've had some tough times before. A couple other things. 170 kids we've lost. My figures show 194. I don't know what it is. But anyway, it looks like about $4 million of student value. We have Curtis Corner closed in Wakefield. That's another $1 million, $2 million. So it looks like we've got about $6 million available for the taxpayers, who in turn would be happy to support the new high school, which we need. But the problem is getting this school operation budget under control, and that's been the problem I've been trying to address here for 20 years. So a couple other thoughts, and then I'll leave you. If I could, Mr. President, through Brian here, what I didn't understand here is that the total of the bank anticipation notes comes to about $269 million, call it $270 million, yet 20-year bond organization, the state and the town, that comes out to $220 million. How's the $50 million difference? I don't quite, I can't quite put that to number for a construction cost for the those three bands.
So the bands are 3 individual issuances. They'd be issued for 1 year. So the first year, again, estimated at this time, $35 million. That'd be for 1 year. The next one, $85 million in year 2, fiscal year 27.
Total $270 million, I agree, 3 years. I just want to know versus the bond that would be, if we did a 20-year here, if everything stays the same, if you add up the 2 payments, the town's $140 million, the state 80, we're $220 million. What's that $50 million spread?
I'm sorry, I'm not following.
Well, the bands really get the school constructed.
Yes.
All right, $270 million that we're going to issue there.
Yes.
200. What's the number I give you? 200.
Which we pay interest only and for those years. Yes.
Okay, but our state and the town have $220 million of debt that they're going to finance. So I'm just trying to get the difference here.
Difference between, that's what I'm not.
$270 million of construction bond, 1-year bands being offered, let's say, the next 3 years.
There's 1 year there will be a band of $35 million.
Yeah, then 85, and then whatever's the other.
Yeah, but the 35 will be, when we take out the 85, that would pay off the 35, and we'd have an additional 54
Right,
additional.
that's all I'm trying to get. There's a rollout paying
Yes.
out the one before.
So are you asking for what the interest payments would be in those years? I'm not following.
Probably current, I have no idea, but are we doing treasury bill rates or getting a special?
Oh, okay, so you wanted the interest rates for the bands?
Yep.
Okay. So for the, that small print, for the.
Range. I do know that change, but just.
Okay.
let me ask it.
In fiscal year, the 2026 ban for, 2025 ban would be at 3.5%. The 2026 ban would be at 3%, and the 2027 ban would be at 2.5%.
Thank you. And the last question, Mr. President, was for, is it Bob? I didn't get his, that gentleman's name, Bob, yeah. You brought up something that the reason.
We're going to toll the time a little because your question's staff, but go ahead.
Okay, well, he brought up, you brought up the 34 difference of the personnel lost, et cetera, dollar amount. If 17, just half of those people are the fully tenured instructors, that's $2 million of health benefits and salary. The other group would be $1 million, so that's roughly $3 million of potential savings to give back to the community. I think very, very important, because here's your opportunity, finally, to control the school budget, which in turn will help pay for that high school. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Go ahead.
So when you have 194, to use Jim's numbers, reduction in students, that doesn't equate to you save an average cost to that student. Because going forward, we're not going to be able to close any more schools. We're not going to let go of any more principals. You save the marginal cost, not the average cost. The marginal cost might be $2,000 per student, not 22. So that's the savings we're going to have going forward when we have a reduction in students. The savings is not large because we have declining enrollment. That's why declining enrollment is so hard to bear, because our costs don't go down with that enrollment dropping. So over the years that we've had declining enrollment allowed us to close 2 buildings very quickly. Going forward, we may save $50,000 because of declining enrollment, not $6 million. I just want to make that very clear.
Thank you.
My name is John Majika. I have a couple of questions. Excuse me. The first is, are there any deed restrictions on building on that piece of property? Does anybody know the answer to that?
Jim, is Luke Murray in the audience?
We can just summarize really quickly. Yeah, the short answer is yes. The hazard field was a part of a
Grant or given to
Right.
the town, correct. So how can we build on something we're not supposed to build on?
because we're going to restore where the high school is as a park. So we're basically flip-flopping.
Right, but is that allowed legally?
We think it is. We
Ah, thinking is nice. It is allowed?
we
Yeah,
just
these questions were asked and answered
yeah.
6,
Well,
8 months ago.
I'm on the other side of town. I'm a little out.
No, no,
I
I'm just,
apologize
no,
for
I'm
that.
just
No,
saying, this is.
we
I
did
think
look into it. Luke isn't here, but we did have many
Yeah,
discussions.
we
with the
we
school
got the
building.
answers to this. The
Yeah,
answer is yes.
possible.
We can build on that property by swapping the high school from
Yep.
one side to the other and then making that the open
Because
space.
they really are the same parcel. We're not picking,
I know. So you have 125 million, which is ballooned to 150 million, now 155 million. Do we have an exact number? No. How did we arrive at the 150 million number?
Well, the 150 factored in escalation cost.
right.
That
I want to get down to how many square feet is the building,
So,
and the cost per square foot,
right.
and what means did you arrive at this? Was it
All right.
Marshall and Swift? Was it Means? Was it Bex? How did we get to $150 million?
Chris, come on up, give a brief. We already went through this.
Do you have this, John?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Was there a cost guide used in this?
So we use.
Come on up.
You have to go to the microphone.
Left Field took a look at an independent third-party cost estimator. We also brought on our own cost estimating team, and we also compared cost per square foot numbers as well as MEP numbers with 3 construction managers that we're currently working with. We also prepared a 45-page assessment where we compared the costs of this project to 12 other projects that we've done recently in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. That's how we arrived at our cost per square foot numbers, as well as all of our numbers for commissioning, services, soft costs, architectural fees.
Did you get your numbers from Marshall and Swift or Bex or just?
We got our numbers from real numbers on the street.
Okay. You mentioned your $5 million for contingency. Has there been pre-engineering been done on that lot?
There was, as required by the stage 1 and 2, there has been pre-engineering that have been done. Those numbers have been factored into the project estimates. With that being said, there is always the chance for unknowns on property. You cannot test every single part of a field. You cannot take samples of every single place where VOCs might be contaminated. So yes, sir, while engineering was done, more does need to be done to help validate these cost estimates. You are correct in that assumption.
Is there information that we could point John to online so that he could read and learn more? Because I know it's been
I would.
I'm coming late to the party. I
Yeah,
apologize for
so
that.
I would look at I'm looking to Kate because she's the chair of the school building committee. Are there documents that would be helpful to John and anybody else who's interested in all the pre-work that we've gotten?
So there are currently documents on the project website, skschoolproject.com. Once we get approval from the school building committee, we can update this document that we have right here, so it's easier to follow along, so you can see all of the assumptions that were made for every single individual line item on the project.
My 5 minutes here,
No, you got a minute.
So when you get new information from the committee going to the council for the next meeting, is that going to be made available to the public so that we can see that before the meeting?
Well, that's why I would like a work session, so at least it would
Yeah, we can make
come
it
out.
public for you. Yes.
So it looks like we're having a work session, but we haven't picked a date.
So what's the cost per square foot, if you figured it out?
Cost per square foot All in or just hard construction costs?
All in, everything, complete, soup to nuts,
$965
per square foot. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Maggie Martin. I live in town. I'm just trying to follow along. Was the stadium complex taken totally off of the bond? Originally, it was 125 for the stadium complex over by Curtis Corner Middle School and the new high school. Is it now 150 just for the high school?
No, it's the,
Chris, come on
Why
up.
don't we let Chris?
right.
So we are currently carrying $11 million for the athletic complex, included in that $150 million. So it's the high school and the athletic complex.
And are they going to be built simultaneously at the same time? Or are you going to start the high school, finish that, and then move over?
Come on up, Chris.
So we're going to figure out the most efficient way to build this and the best way to maximize the value of your tax dollars. So those are conversations that we're probably going to have in about 5 or 6 months with the construction manager when we bring them on board to make sure that we're sequencing work so it doesn't interfere with any operations. It makes the most sense for the neighborhood, as well as it's the most cost effective so we can maximize your budget and get you guys everything you want.
That's good. But my follow-up question to that is, so the budget for everything has gone up since initial projections. So what happens if we go over budget? I know it's happened at numerous districts before. So if we have started work and we totally run out of money and we try to pull it from other funds, but it's just really a big sum, will we have to have another referendum bond vote for the town?
So I think that the difference what you're seeing in this project, maybe some of those other projects, and the reason that we went this unorthodox step of coming back to the town council to say 125 isn't going to cut it. 150 is the number that is. We don't want to be put in a position where, like you said, we only have a certain pot of money, we're already in the ground, and prices have risen to the point that we can't complete the building. So that's why when we first took a look at the estimates, when we were brought on board, we said we need to do all the research that we can and give the town council a number that is going to be risk-proof in terms of getting you everything that we've talked about for that $150 million number. We have built in almost $20 million, excuse me, give me my number. We have built in almost $20 million of escalation and contingency into this project, just in case of any cost overruns. Again, we're saying up to $150 million. Right now, our total with escalation is only $143 million, which leaves $10 million for these unknowns that we're talking about that could potentially derail a different sort of project, but we have created the safeguards within our project to make sure that those don't happen. It's a great question, and I can understand why you're asking it when you've seen what's going on in Newport and other places like that. We specifically looked to lessons learned from those other school districts and said, how can we make sure South Kingstown doesn't fall into that same trap?
And then I was just wondering if it ever was discussed about, because there's so much talk about how the high school is too big for the numbers, about merging schools, like having, you come in one door and there's like the wing for the middle school and there's the wing for the high school. Was that ever, instead of just totally knocking down a building, because it seems like our buildings aren't very well maintained, and there's all this deferred maintenance on all of these buildings, and we're gonna have a bond, pay for all of this, and then by the time that the bond is over, we won't have money to pay for fixing up any other schools.
So they do talk, that's come up, lots of people have asked that question, and I believe that the town manager has spoken with the Narragansett School Department. They're not interested in merging with us.
No, I didn't mean merge, I meant merging, like, we just closed Curtis Corner Middle School, and I know, is it 7th and 8th is going to Broad Rock?
Broad Rock.
Yeah. But what about having the middle school at the high school, just having its own wing, separate from the high school kids, but there's no reason to just do away with a whole building just because it's too big for our needs.
One of the problems is the kids don't fit. as big as the building is, if we have over 700 9th through 12th graders and you have almost 600 6 through 8, you've got 1,300 kids that they are not going to fit in that existing building. The second problem with the existing building is it's not conducive to 21st century learning. There's not enough lab space, and there's issues with that building. But it's also not feasible to merge them because the numbers of kids don't fit in that building.
I don't see how that works because I looked at the other schools and none of them are at capacity and they're all declining. So I just don't see how that works. And then with it not being up to the 21st century standards, I get that, but can't we just fix it? Like, it doesn't seem to be just...
Oh, sorry. I think the first thing Mr. Conti did when he came on board was assess every school building.
Mhm.
So my understanding, walked through every room and every building, looked at every mechanical system, and his first report to the school committee was about what it would take just to get those buildings functioning properly without making them better or improving them in any way. And if I remember correctly, and maybe Phil would be the best person to respond to this, that the high school cost was something like $50 million to get it to just to get as it currently is, just to fix everything, and that was 2 years ago. So it costs probably more than $50 million to fix it now, just not to do what you're doing, split it in half, that's an additional cost, or to make the learning spaces better. And the reimbursement on that cost is, I assume, a lower rate than what we're talking about. So it's not free to keep the current building.
I get that, and I
extremely costly.
have looked at the deferred maintenance and all of the line items and everything, and it doesn't seem like everything is necessary. I know in an ideal world we would have it 100% perfect, but everything comes at a cost, and we just have to think about, I mean, yeah, a beautiful new school would be great, but it's going to be astronomically expensive. Our enrollment is going down, and instead of doing all of that, just fixing what we already have, and not necessarily fixing everything, but fixing it so that it does meet our standards, and that it's, I mean, at the end of the day, it's more important that the kids are achieving well and getting good grades than just building a new building. There's not necessarily a correlation between a new building and academics. So.
Thank you. We did tool your time a little bit because.
Rory, can I speak to that for a quick second? And then I think we might be gearing up the same thing. Yeah, please do.
So renovation was explored as part of your stage one. It's required by RIDE that you investigate every option at your disposal. RIDE doesn't want you just to go for a shiny new thing. You know, as was said, they want you to do all of your due diligence. It has been said in no uncertain terms that a renovation to the high school would be not just incredibly expensive, but would not be supported by RIDE. So you would be doing that cost you may not even get your 35% base reimbursement if you were to do a project that RIDE did not approve. RIDE is not interested in fixing up old buildings just to put kids back in 19th or 20th century learning environments. That's not how they see this program. That's not how this entitlement was designed by the legislature. It was to put kids in 21st century learning spaces and to keep schools warm, safe, and dry. As was mentioned, you do have about $50 million in deferred maintenance at the high school. We're looking at an escalation factor that was done 2 years ago. I think you're probably closer to 70 million right now. And also we have to consider that work will, if it was to move forward, it would go on when the students are in school. You would not be able to do that work over summers. We're talking major fire suppression systems, HVAC equipment replacements, projects that are incredibly expensive and incredibly intrusive, and you would most likely have to put kids in swing space for those schools. This is no longer a project environment that we've seen in years past where you can get a SummerSlam project done in 3 months. With the way lead times are, the tightness of the labor force, all the other restraints on project delivery currently in our market, these type of projects take a year. And I think you're seeing that in a lot of districts with roof replacements that once took just 2 months. Now we're in October and the roofs aren't even still on buildings, and some kids are unfortunately having school canceled on them in other districts. So just some food for thought on that item.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Andrew O'Brien. I live in Wakefield. First off, I don't like speaking at these things, so please give me some leeway. I have sat through, I counted at least 14 of these since I moved to this town. I moved here right after the last vote failed, which meant I moved to a town with a crumbling school. I am in education. I am a teacher. I did not get there the normal way. I worked in the private sector for many years. And I would like to say that these guys right here didn't get here because they live in the town. They got here because they are professionals who we paid to be here. And they know more than us. That's why we bring them here to explain to us what's going on. As a professional in the schools now, I am not at this school. I would like to remind everyone, by the way, FTE means full-time employee, so those are humans. So every time we talk about these FTEs are gone, or we don't have to pay this person, like, these are people that we're losing who are not educating our students. These are choices that we are making that are affecting the future of this town. And as a lot of people have stated tonight, we're here because in the past, education has been important here. And right now, I think everybody really needs to make the choice, is it still important or is it not? If this town is going to heckle and jekyll over like dollars and cents and say, we are going to find this money in a couch cushion, this isn't going to get done. And I sat through so many meetings listening to these same complaints and the same bickering back and forth about, well, this dollar could be here, this dollar could be there. I'm willing to pay the money, other people are willing to pay. We moved to this town because there are schools and they need to be good, and the school we have is not. And I remember reading early on, they said, we are going to have a world-class education. Honestly, look at yourselves in the mirror and ask yourselves, do we right now? Are we going to invest in a world-class education? Because the conversations we're having are about investing in bargain basement education. So make a choice, move forward. We cannot keep going to these meetings. We're losing money from RIDE, like everything is going wrong again. So just look at your purpose. Listen to the professionals. Listen to one guy who is super nervous right now, just begging everyone to like, there is a very clear choice if you have a clear thought process. Be honest about the thought process, be honest where you're coming from, to yourself and to this community, and it's either going to get done or it isn't. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to just say, we're talking about the project because the cost to the community could be 17% more in your taxes. It comes out to be almost another quarterly payment. So we don't want that. It's our responsibility here to try to make it happen without being that large of a payment. So we should do right by all 30,000 people and try to find the money. It's not, I said the project should happen, but do I want to have everybody think about paying another quarterly tax payment because it was quick and easy? No, I'm willing to do all the hard work to find the money to make the project work so that we're not paying 17% more in 5 years on our tax bills. That's all.
Exactly. Brett Harrington, 2 Lab Hill Drive. I'm a professional in real estate. We need a new school. No doubt about it. We need a new school. But what I see in the industry is, and I personally have lived in Rhode Island my whole life, I was able to move here in 2019 after my kids went to college. I could not afford, we wanted to live in South Kingstown. We got married in 1992. I couldn't raise my kids in South Kingstown. Housing is too expensive. And that hasn't changed. I mean, everybody's like this. That's the bottom line. We're not going to see an increase in enrollment. It's just not going to happen. So build the right school, build the school we need, look at all the funding, look at how many kids are in front of each teacher, look at the cost per pupil as opposed to other towns that are comparable in our size, number of students, and work together, as I said a year ago. That's what I wanted. My desire was this. It took this long to get here. Work as a team. You're on our side. You're on our side. We're paying the bills. It's as simple as that. Education is important. I'm not saying that, is it? But she's right. To add a 5th payment, And I understand you were saying about level funding, and one thing resonated with me, I want to forget which one said it, that you would level funded the last 4 years, but you admitted that part of your budget was the closure of 2 schools, which factored into that. So technically, that wasn't a level fund. You did get that extra money in the closing of the schools. But anyway, that's the point I wanted. I see money coming in. Maybe I'm wrong. When you close 2 schools, if you have some money coming in, right, you've got an increase, right? Or am I wrong?
It offsets the increase in costs. Like we had 9% increase in benefits, and we had increase in salary, contractually obligated.
So
not just for teachers, but for custodians and teachers' aides as well. So across the board, there was a contractual increase.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
While Doral's handing something out, if we could just make sure that all of the information that was shared tonight gets up on the website as soon as possible, because I know the community can't see any of the papers that we have. Is that what we had last night? Let me,
What do you got for
I
us,
got a
Doral?
copier.
Hold on one sec. Oh, all right.
Good evening. My name is Doral Beasley. Here's a few pieces of data you didn't get tonight. In 2018 and 2022, there were $250 million bond referendums that the voters of Rhode Island approved for money for fixing our schools. So half $500 million. The problem is the school building authority right now, their allowance per square foot for new construction for a high school is $589. And the actual cost is like $1,000 a square foot. So the reality is that we're only getting 60 cents on the dollar. Now, the 52.5% we thought we were going to get is actually 31%. And if things go wrong and we only get the 35%, then with that cost differential, it's 20%. So where are our state legislators? They should be going back and asking to have another referendum for more money. This is affecting every district in the state who's trying to fix their schools. Now, I sent everybody here, school committee and the town council, the school building committee, a few days ago, a plan of how to pay for this school. Because we're here tonight, how are we going to pay for it? How are we going to pay for it? This is one way. For the past 22 years, in a row, 22 years every year for the last 22 years, the enrollment in this town, in our schools, has gone down. We were at 1.4400, we're down to 23. That's 47%. We've lost over 2,000 students out of our school district. That's a death spiral, okay? No, we're number one. We're number one. I don't think any other school district now is over 40%. We are just crushing that one. Now, East Greenwich and Barrington, over the same period of time, their enrollments have gone up and down, basically 200 students up and down for the last same period of time. And why? Because their school districts are still ranked the top in the state. So people still want to move there and put their students in those schools. So anyway, So how you can do this is this way. The Rhode Island state law says that if your town has a decline in enrollment, you can fund your school district on a per pupil basis. Now, last year, I was the person that put the referendum in for a $1.5 million decrease, but the amount it could have been for was $2 million, and that was only a decline of 97 students. This year, we have 188 students that have left the district, and that calculation this year is $4.4 million. Now, if this town council and the school committee would get together and say, maybe it's time to do right for the taxpayers in this town who for the last 22 years have paid the freight, and we fund our school district on a per pupil basis for 1 year, okay? 1 year. 2024-25, do it for 1 year. People's taxes in next year when the bills come out will have dropped 7%. And over the next 5 years, as this high school gets built, that'll disappear. And when the high school opens up and we have 50 new students in the building, they're coming back from South Kingston or transferring here, they'll take care of the rest of the debt. Not a penny paid by the taxpayers.
All right, thank you, Doral.
Hi, I'm Jen Nurbon. I live on 31 Bittersweet. I had 3 kids. I pulled all 3 of them out of our public school system and sent them to private, which probably killed our budget. And I'm very concerned about taxes. And thank you, Deb, for what you're pointing out, a 5th quarterly tax payment, especially with how bad things have been. Have we ever actually looked at why our enrollment is declining? I don't think it's because it's a building, okay? We can't build a building and they'll all come, okay? If you look at the SAT scores from Rikes data, there's declining SAT math scores over the last 6 years. There's also, if we look at the 21-22 RIDE data, math, science, ELA, comparing us to Barrington and East Greenwich, we're a lot lower than those 2 school systems, but our operating costs are $7,000 to $8,000 more per pupil. And that is what we have to look at. And then when the gentleman was up here talking about full-time employees, those are people, we need to pay them. If we have such massive declining enrollment, why are we keeping all these full-time employees? I would think that we should look at our operating cost and what we're spending on our students with such declining enrollment. Because in the real world, in corporate, okay, my company, we're laying off thousands of people, okay? The money's not coming in, you lay people off, it's a fact of life. And we can't just pay people because we feel bad we can't lay them off. If our enrollment is going down so much, why do we need all of this? Why are our operating costs so high? But again, our declining enrollment, has anyone done a study and asked all these people why they left our school system? Do we have that data? No, we don't. We don't. And that is
Reasons why they left the school, I don't believe we have that information now.
well, we need that information.
I don't know how we
need that
would obtain
information.
such
You can't just
information.
assume our buildings are declining.
We have data that identifies where they have gone. I don't know if we have the specific reasons why they have gone to where they are.
Well, we need to find that out because I would say, I know with me, I didn't pull my kids out because the buildings were declining. That had nothing to do with it. I pulled my
You have
kids
some
out for
insight,
other
you can help
reasons.
us. Why'd you pull your kids out? Starts here.
I pulled my kids out because of the administration. I believe every organization, the way it's run, top down, and the way that everything was run, decisions that were made, education, everything, that they weren't being managed properly. Kids were being overlooked. My kids were being overlooked and weren't getting the education that they needed. So my kids went to Monsignor Clark and Prout, and which, again, Prout, $15,000. Monsignor Clark, $7,000. Fantastic education, and I still don't understand why our operating cost is $28,000. And for someone who's a single parent, hoping to retire here, having a 5th quarterly tax payment, and never mind the tax payment, you have to look at everything as a whole with interest rates and with utilities and groceries and everything. Yeah, we all want, our kids are important, and the education for our kids are a priority, and we want to have a good school system and have people come. But if we don't look at why everyone is leaving, why do you all of a sudden think that we're gonna build a nice fancy new building and all these people are gonna come? No one's even gonna be able to afford to come and live here, especially with the 5th quarterly tax payment. That's something that we really need to look at, is why. I'm scared to death about the cost of this whole project and maxing out. And then all the elementary schools, from what I understand, a lot of our buildings have a lot of repairs that need to be done. Well, how are we gonna afford to pay for that? And then we have we have a very aging population, and I believe we have a shortage in health care, ambulatory care, that the town can't afford to pay for. How are we gonna pay for that? If anything else happens, how are we gonna afford to pay that? You just don't max out your credit card. That's not how you wanna live, is on credit. And that's what's scary to everybody. And the ones that we're worrying about the money and the taxpayer, we're not anti-kid. We want all the kids to have a good education. That should be priority. These are tomorrow's leaders. So it has nothing to do with that. We have to look at the whole picture. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would just like to say, I think that the new report cards that have recently come out from the state of Rhode Island gives a pretty good accounting of some of the problems that are being seen in our school system. And I feel very optimistic at what I see here, that particularly with the direction under the new acting superintendent, with the fact that we actually have gotten the numbers, we're taking steps, we're I feel like we're addressing some of those concerns and that we are trying to move forward. So I would just ask that you give us an opportunity to do that.
Hey everyone, I'm Phil Eden. I live in Wakefield. I went to South Kingstown schools. My 4 siblings did. We had an incredible experience there. When I left for college, I lived in Ithaca, New York, and I bring that up because I knew the mayor and some folks in city government over there, and for I think it was about a decade after I left, they managed to keep tax rates flat. And they did that by having smart growth downtown. They expanded the tax base. And one of the frustrations I have with these conversations is, like, we definitely need a new school. We need a good school so all of our kids can have the same experience or an even better experience than I did. We make these decisions from the mindset of the pie is shrinking. What are we gonna cut? Where are we gonna find this? What are we gonna cut here? I am asking for, and I know that this town council is doing it, let's have a positive vision of a growing tax base in this town, smart development downtown so that we can protect our residential neighborhoods, protect our open spaces, but not always be operating from this framework of, like, we're inevitably shrinking, the population is inevitably graying, the student enrollment is inevitably going down. We can change that. And I think this town council is doing a good job. So I would ask that we have a positive vision of a town in 20, 30 years that's thriving with families and young people who want to move here. And yeah, I think that that's achievable. I think you guys are doing that work. And to Deb's point, I know it's like, it is hard. This town is crazy expensive. I'm lucky I bought my house before the pandemic because I couldn't afford to buy now. We are not going to have all these answers by Thanksgiving. We're not. So we got to make a decision, and I appreciate everyone's work and everyone's due diligence, but we need to make this decision for the full bond amount now, and it's going to take some time to figure out how we're going to pay for that, and I appreciate the work in that. We're not going to have all this information before we make that decision, and things are going to change. Interest rates could go up or they could go down. We could have a lot more great development downtown, or we could not. We're not going to know the answers to that, but we do know that we need a new school. We know that we need to fund it at the full amount, so we need to make that decision and then keep putting our heads together. I also want to say, like, I understand that test scores have not kept up to like when I was in school, but we've had a rough patch. This school committee and this administration have been doing a great job. I think we've righted the ship and we're moving in a really positive direction. So I'm optimistic for the future of this town, and I hope that when we make decisions, we're making decisions with that vision of what the town can be and what it's going to be when we all work together.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you, Phil.
Did you already speak? Did you already speak? We're limiting everyone to one time to allow as many who can. Doral, you already went. Anyone in the audience? Anyone in the audience who haven't spoken yet? Come on up. Anyone? No, Doral. Thank you.
Mike Agus, I'm on the Economic Development Committee here in town. I've been here about 6 years. You know, there's a right time for everything. And it seems to me that a lot of the discussion that we're having today is discussion that you have when you're setting the budget. And I believe we go through a rigorous process of developing a budget, getting it approved by elected officials, further approved by additional elected officials, and I just don't believe that we're going to find a bunch of tomato cans or money under the carpet someplace that is going to help us, reduce the outlay that we're going to have to make. And on top of that, as Brian was saying earlier, those kind of decisions you make when you get ready to float the bond issue. Right now, what we should be doing is trying to figure out how do we convince the town to adopt this proposal. As far as taxes are concerned, I hate to be the bearer of good news, but taxes here are very low. Low, low, low. Okay? I lived in Massachusetts 30 years ago. I was paying $5,500 a year in property tax. It was a bigger house. Their schools were regionalized, by the way, from junior high up to high school. Okay, and I was paying $5,500 a year, same as I'm paying here now. I retired here because the cost of living and the taxes are low. That's why I came here. I'm not saying that we need to be spendthrift, and I don't want to be insensitive to anybody's hardships. Many towns have accommodations for people who can't afford increased taxes, and we should certainly do that, and I'm willing to pay more so that elderly people don't have to leave and all those kind of things. So I guess that's about all I wanted to say was that the other thing, I guess another way to look at it is if you have good schools, property values go up. Okay, so if you're paying another $500 over the next 5 years in taxes, your property value is going to increase by $20,000. Okay, so it's not sometimes it's you're making an investment, I guess. And for my money, making an investment in good quality schools is the best investment we can make. That's it.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else in the audience wish to speak?
Was someone get?
Good evening. My name's Deborah McDowell. I live here in Wakefield. We moved here from Newport. We bought our house here because our daughter was attending Prout. She couldn't get the classes she needed for advanced chemistry because there weren't enough students at Prout, and we had to decide between North Kingstown and South Kingstown. Our businesses were in Newport. We chose South Kingstown because the taxes were less, and it had a great sense of community. At that time, the school was rated at number 4. It's rated number 17 now. She got a good education. We didn't come here because of the building. We came here because of the education. Newport was, at that time, was rated at 20. So there was no choice. We couldn't go there. They didn't have the AP classes either. And we bought a house, it's an old house, 1709. We didn't tear it down and borrowed tons of money, hundreds of thousands to rebuild. We fixed it every year. We did maintenance on it, we did renovations on it, we did plumbing and windows and septic and electrical and plumbing and everything else. But our schools haven't done that. You haven't maintained the buildings. You haven't taken the money aside and fixed the buildings like you should have. And now we're paying the price. So we're going to get a new school, and you're going to do it again. I think we need to change that. So you're asking us to go into serious debt, to raise the taxes on everybody, and then what? You get a building that you don't fix, you don't maintain. We all know that the student population is dropping. It's not dropping because of the building, it's dropping because the education's bad. That's why people are going other places. They're not going there because it's cold in the room, or it's hot in the room, or it doesn't have the right air conditioner. They're going because the teaching isn't good. Like I said, it was number 4 in 2015, and now it's 17. We're paying over $20,000 per student, and we're still number 17. East Greenwich has so much less, and they have so much better education. I think that's what we need to focus on. In the math scores in 2017, 20% of them were exceeded. Now it's 10% exceeded expectations. In 2017, 10% of the SATs in math that didn't meet requirements were 10%, and now it's almost 17. More people need to care about the education. More parents need to care about the education, not just the teachers. Teachers are doing as much as they can, but somehow it's not getting done. The public needs to understand that there's also repairs to other schools, and they're not going to get done. They're not going to get done with this. This money is going to the new school. And we have other projects that this town needs to do, not just the high school. And I don't understand, I mean, we've been in construction for a long time, why you can't fix that building. You say there's not enough room for tech, but you're only using 60% of the school. I don't get it. So I think all of our priorities are misplaced. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else? All right, that's going to bring us to the end here.
Before, I just want to
Go ahead.
thank everybody who spoke tonight and asked questions. I think it's really important. You know, you didn't come in at the beginning or the end. You're here. Everyone's here because they want information. Whether you want the project to go forward or you have some concerns, it's important to keep coming to meetings and asking questions, because everybody is doing their part to educate the entire community who might not realize that this project is happening or could happen. So I thank everyone for coming and sharing their opinion.
Chris, come on up. What do you got?
Just very quickly, a question was asked of Brian Silva earlier, that if bond interest rates come down, can we refinance their bond? And I just received some clarification on that. It's actually pursuant to Rhode Island general law, we're actually required to refinance if interest rates go down. So it's required that we actually take part in that, Brian. So I just wanted to give some clarification on that.
All right. Thank you for that. Good news. All right, it's going to bring us to the end. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you to the school committee, school administration. This was a good meeting, and we'll see you soon.